Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Damon Goddard, and I'm your host with the Forever Forward podcast. Appreciate you guys watching, listening. As we kind of continue to evolve as a podcast, we'll be pushing these guys out to actual podcasts. And so, if you're coming back to Facebook, if you're going to YouTube, make sure you're subscribing, liking, commenting, doing all the whole just to stay involved and really kind of join us in the conversation. And listen, this is just the platform for us to be able to join the individuals that we bring on, whether it be the athletes, musicians, authors, people that are making impacts. Join the conversation with us, and let's talk about how are you keeping moving forward right now. During the climate of things right now, especially we've had this void of the COVID thing, and with the climate of everything going on. Let's just talk about it. Let's just have that, authentic piece of just going, hey, listen, here's, a little piece of the information. So I'm excited about today. This is a very good buddy of mine. We have had quite the history that tracks back all the way to college. And, it was really fun to meet Mike at the very beginning in college, and I instantly attached myself to him because this is a guy that is making massive impacts now, but back then made an immense impact on me. Because this is a guy that when you walk away from a conversation with him, you just absolutely feel lighter, and you feel like you just got a little bit of life breathed into you. And really, that's the premise of everything that we have on Forever Forward, is to just be able to have somebody breathe their story into us and to help us to understand, how do I take that one step past this threshold that is just absolutely feeling like a massive mountain to me, but how do I simply take one step forward and keep moving forward. And so, today's guest is Michael Dauphinee. Let me give you a little bit of background on Michael Dauphinee. I mean, we'll get into the college stuff, but right now,
Not too much.
no, let's not too much. But right now, this guy's making such an impact. One of the world's most sought after strengths consultant. He's training and coaching at companies, massive companies. Let's say like Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. He's doing with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Golly, he's with. Who else? The U.S. Olympic Committee. I mean, this guy is seeing a wide array of companies that he's making an impact and helping coach through some very difficult times, and maybe some times that they feel stuck. And so, to me, a coach has a lot of different hats that they wear. It's not just somebody that's on the field and trying to coach these athletes. Coaching somebody through life, so coaching somebody through business is incredibly imperative. Why I like this guy is just always looking for ways to be able to inspire others, and mostly navigate through navigate through life. And living courageously is really his entire platform. He's written a book. You gotta check it out. It's absolutely awesome. Extraordinary it's an amazing book. And we'll ask Mike in a little bit where we can find it. It's where we dive into the simple fact of the world gave us a map, but what you really need is a compass, right? And so we'll break down today the four pieces to it, with identity and permission and courage and generosity, that really start to give us the four-pronged approach on the compass to help us navigate through life, not just simply here's a map, here's your end result, good luck. And so, Mike, I appreciate you joining us, and let's get him on here.
Yeah.
Man, it's so good to see you, bud. Absolutely good.
Hey, man. Good to see you too.
And
Good to see you too.
you're in Minneapolis right now. Is that correct?
Yes, Minneapolis, Minnesota. So when I'm not on the road, which no one is these days very much, Minneapolis is home. So
Nice.
up here in the middle of it all. So
Nice. Well, you're avoiding the heat from Dallas over here. We're already in goodness near the 100 degrees. I know you spent some time down here in Texas.
yeah.
Both of us have. Working at a camp called T-Bar Sports, which is an awesome camp
Yep.
in the middle of summer in Texas. And man, it was hot. So you're asking us to let alone just survive the heat, but then to be able to kind of guide and direct some of these kiddos that we were working with. That was quite interesting. But
I'm like, I don't know if they would. I'm like, man, they trusted those kids' lives into our hands. I was like, what are they thinking? Looking
no,
back, I'm like, what were they thinking? great camp, don't mind you, but I'm like,
Yeah.
a bunch of 20-year-olds in the Austin heat trying to hope nobody gets heat stroke.
I know, man. We're dealing with our own things, man. We're trying. Yeah, that was an amazing camp, amazing
Long time
time.
ago.
Yeah, just a couple of years, Mike. Don't age us too bad. But listen, man. You and I go back to college, and and one of my favorite memories with you and I is when we'd go to these high school groups and gymnasiums and stadiums, and we would do the silliest skits and listen, we were just working with what we had in order to try to
7 a.m. before school. These school assemblies in the morning at like 7 a.m., half awake.
I know, and that's the last thing these kiddos wanted to have two college knuckleheads, trying to breathe life into them, let alone they haven't even had breakfast yet. So, but man, you and I go back quite a bit, and you've worked with me on a personal level, professional level, really breathing life into me on some pretty deep valleys that I've had through life and help me navigate through effectively just those periods. And number one, I'm just going to start with thanking you for who you are, and really kind of the work that you're doing through me. But let's talk a little bit about what is it that you do. What is just give me a little 10,000 foot looking down version of what you do.
Yeah, because there's that highest level where, when I think about there's the titles and the jobs, but ultimately for me, it's the realization that most people live afraid they'll never achieve their greatest potential. They're afraid that potential will go unrealized. And yet when they look in the mirror, they realize they're usually staring at their greatest roadblock. My job is to help them figure out a path to realize the potential and to get out of their own way. And I've basically been doing this for more than 15 years. And it's this idea of how do you come alongside somebody as a guide, helping them walk. And that can look like executive coaching at the highest levels of companies and governments and situations. That can be trainings, both digital, in person, or, I had a publisher approach me, and that's how Extraordinary came to be, is how do you create content and how do you deliver? But it's about helping people realize their potential and yet figure out how to get out of their own way. And that's basically what I spend my time doing.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I think, a lot of us, go through the humdrum of the day, and we love what we do. And most people, hopefully they enjoy what they do. But, I think a lot of people don't understand, giving themselves permission to actually explore what it is that they're called to do. And I think you've done an amazing job on the individual level, but then even from a company standpoint. Listen, I remember conversations that you and I have had via even text where I'm like, hey man, what are you up to? And you're like, dude, I'm in Afghanistan or something like right now. And I'm like, well, what? Yeah. And he's like, there's bombs going off. And so, it's really intriguing to me, the conversations the conversations that you can have with even different countries, helping them navigate through a lot of turmoil. And so, or maybe it's just helping them having the realization that there's something better. Right. And so I think, even within the book that you have, Extraordinary, it really lays out, and much like what I do with an athlete, it lays out these progressions in order to elicit really cool performance. And I think, the way you've laid out that book through progressions of understanding identity and having the permission and the courage and then, the generosity piece, it works in a progressive manner in order to kind of have that realization. Kind of talk us through a little bit about, Extraordinary, just, what is it from those progressions? What was really the premise behind, or the platform behind the book, to really kind of help us, understand it a little bit better?
Yeah, because I got my start in the early days just trying to help people understand their strengths. So I'm a big fan of Gallup and their work with Clifton Strengths. That's great. But what I'd realized is that information, information isn't transformation. Just like with an athlete, you can't simply put them in front of a video or hand them a book and the data transforms them. It requires more than that. And so, but this idea for me that started to play out, well, what does it actually take? There was an author years ago, I think, last name Ramos, who wrote a book called The Age of the Unthinkable. And he was talking about how things are progressing in the early 2000s, post the Soviet Union and things. And he realized, he said that so much of us get stuck in this idea of what's called resistance. He's like, in the 80s, so it was based on what's called threat analysis. You would identify every threat, and then you come up with a resistance plan for every single threat. And so even SWOT analysis have their place, but the idea of threat analysis assumes then that you could identify every single threat. You could identify every single thing that's coming at you. And so And that kind of was in the 80s in the military in the early days of the Cold War. And then it seeps its way into corporate America, which seeps its way into our development, our coaching. And before we know it, we're then trained how do we do SWOT analysis and threat analysis in life. And one of the takeaways from that book years ago that really framed out some of my thinking of why to create extraordinary was the key isn't being resistant to every threat. It was figuring out how to have a resilience that didn't matter what threat was coming. Mm. And so I started thinking, what would it take for people to start to, there's no answers in this book, as much as going, how do you develop a compass or something that will keep you resilient if the road changes, if the world changes around you, if the situation you're in suddenly falls apart. Yeah. And that was kind of the framework of what brought me to try to write Extraordinary in the first place.
Yeah, I find that interesting because, I mean, there's even applications for, working with, like what I do is, there's so many variables that we have an objective to get to A to Z. And, we keep ourselves focused on the Z, but man, there's so many variables that are going to throw us off of that path. And so I think, being able, much like you have, to equip us with, all right, here's my compass to have those course corrections along the way, and maybe even just an adjustment in our entire path. And so, I want to, be able to really kind of, dive a little bit deeper into, the book. But, one thing that really spoke to me, throughout the entire process, and I think this is very applicable during, a lot of the void that everyone's kind of been in over the past 3 months, 4 months, and a lot of the, kind of social climate right now, is the generosity piece in the book. And, it's as an overarching theme, and you can correct me, is don't tie your hope to your resilience, anchor to something bigger than yourself. And when we're talking about massive change, even socially or even within our family or relationships, talk us a little bit about the power of being able to go through a generous mindset and the multiplication effect that starts to happen. That was really something huge for me to start to understand.
Yeah, because I think as I lay out the different points, it's this idea of a compass versus a map, right? You have identity, understanding yourself, your talent, your passion, your natural purpose, your courage and permission. How do you dream with that? How do you put that into a vision? And then the courage about action. But then even in that, if you're lucky enough to go, I have a grip on who I am, where I want to go, and the action to take there, why then do we ultimately lose the ability to stay on track? Why do our arms get tired of holding that horse on that road that we're heading down? And I realized as I was doing the research of putting this together was that this last piece is generosity. But instead of generosity being about money, it's about allowing the path of your life to be intersected with the path of someone else. Because the relations don't matter, that it changes the direction of our life. I think one of the last chapters of the book I call it's a hashtag I love a lot, which is follow the relationship. Mm-hmm. Ultimately realizing that relationships are like gravity, and much like people talk about going to the Mars, we've seen SpaceX launch this week. Their whole mission is to Mars. Like they slingshot around the moon in order to get satellites to go there. Mm-hmm. The proximity to something that matters of significance will change the direction, and it also give you multiplying strength. You think of the stories, and again, some are apocryphal, some are not, about whether or not mothers can really lift cars off babies. But it's this idea of people who will sacrifice and suddenly find the highest levels of strength because they believe they have something greater than their own survival at risk. There's something in that moment that's deeper. And so part of why I think a lot of times we struggle to keep going is we don't have a reason bigger than us. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, part of the whole takeaway of logos therapy was that he was like that the world is that we would naturally be more likely to survive the pain and suffering that he went through, of course, in Dachau and Auschwitz, mm-hmm. being someone who said, the world is waiting for me. Like there's a reason out there. There's a why that is looking for me to answer that question. And so we need to be in relationships that will actually kind of give us the resilience and the energy to kind of push us on. And so even now, think about like the social climate right now, where we're at, we're watching this whole new phase, mm-hmm. even COVID and the economy, but also I'm in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Like we're ground zero right now in the heart of everything, which has been tragic, terrible, and also in some ways it's the most inspiring. It's like watching the world turn a corner, mm-hmm. and it's completely connected to the relationships you have, how you engage this, right. and how we can step into this. And I think so. Relationships end up being the key to generosity but there's an amazing power that pulls us on when we let our lives intersect with the lives of other people.
Yeah, one of the greatest examples that you gave in that book, and especially in particular this chapter, take me through a little bit about your own personal experience. Just a little
Yeah.
highlight on one of those transformational moments that you had was on one of your bike rides. It was once again, it was not just a bike ride for just raising money. There was a specific attachment to why you were doing that, but even within that, you were able to then have a very transformational moment of understanding, the gravitational pull through the cycling. So, without me butchering it, give me your own personal experience.
It's funny. Everybody kind of like, tell me about the bike ride. We do the California Coast Classic. My best friend and his wife, their 9-year-old daughter, died of complications of an autoimmune disease connected to juvenile arthritis. So every year we do the California Coast Classic from San Francisco to LA. I thought he was crazy when he started. I'm like, we never cycled in our lives. We got going. And I remember, I'm 250 pounds. I'm what they call a Clydesdale. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm going to do this. But I did it. I'd never biked before in my life. And I got down there, and it's 550 miles, San Francisco to LA. And on our last day, you're finally done. You're kind of there. But I'm all alone because I'm straggling, or I don't know what had happened. But as we pulled down the hill by Pepperdine, I realized in Malibu that there was a giant professional cycling club pulling up to the line beside me. And we're all wearing our people that day were wearing their jerseys, so we're finishing our ride coming into LA. And the pro team asked me, hey, what are you doing? I explained, this is what I'm doing this ride. They're like, wow, that's awesome, man. That's great. And then the light turned green and they pulled off the line. Now, if you know anything about cycling, Lance Armstrong was on the 30 for 30 this week.
Yeah.
We know about the awareness of cycling right now, especially in the summers. You know that there's a peloton. There's a group of riders that ride together. And then teams will actually do drafting. You pull them behind someone, and the aerodynamics of the air coming off them will pull you along. Well, I've drafted some, but the trick of it is you don't just get to be pulled, you got to be a part of it. Well, as they pulled off the line, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I wonder if. And so I jumped onto the back of this pro line, and I'm spinning for all I'm worth. I don't know if my legs were going faster than 20 miles an hour at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm literally just pedaling and pedaling, but all of a sudden I get pulled along. And as we got pulled through Malibu, we were going faster and faster. Well, over time, the line peels back and they're going to pull behind me. And I remember being like, well, this has been fun. It's a great story. I'm going to peel off now, because I could see the leaders were peeling off. And at the last minute, instead of cutting me off, they got in behind me. And one by one, they would circulate and they kind of kept me in there and kept me protected. We were going so fast down the one. I'd never gone. And I was realizing that being in the perfect spot, being in that space, in the right relationship, gave me pull, but also it allowed me to do things I'd never do any other way. It allowed me to be in that moment, and it was the rush of my life, as it just literally felt like getting sucked down the highway in this mass of people that were protecting me and were like screaming, come on, man, don't give up as we went. It was transformation to realize that that's how I've gone through my life. Is that people that I expected to cut me off are bringing me along, and how do I do that for others? How do I circle behind someone who needs me? How do I let them draft off me when they're tired? But if I don't have the relationships, I'm basically riding alone, and so are they.
Yeah.
So we do less together, each other.
Yeah, and albeit that we may have the same end goal in mind, but it sure is exhausting. And so being able to attach ourselves to that type of peloton, that type of line, the physics behind it is absolutely amazing, because you actually gain more momentum, you gain speed, and now your cause actually has more fuel to it, rather than just feeling like you're on your own island. And definitely all of us have experienced that kind of island moment where if we are going through a different valley or whatnot, we self-isolate and we kind of push people out. Talk to me a little bit about, and heck, I've even had to, kind of navigate through this on my own, as well as, going through a lot of self-isolation through those really deep valleys.
Yeah.
What are those how do we get equipped when we feel like, man, self-isolation is like the answer, where then we shift our thinking and go, wait a minute, I need to have that attachment, that peloton, where now I can be able to, have that gravitational pull drive me a little bit further forward to get out of this particular valley.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm even as I'm kind of watching the world and I'm thinking about my own brokenness at different times, like part of the work I've done, this. I've spent a lot of work working on security, governance, and justice advisor in Afghanistan for about 3 or 4 years, Nigeria as well. basically trying to create leadership within the police departments in fragile environments. And had a really rough 2018 to the point where I walked away in December with, after some close calls with some things,
Yeah.
ended up walking away with some pretty severe stress, PTSD, and took all of 2019 off
Yeah.
to put my brain back together as part of that process. And I realized that that my life so much of the time ends up being a product of like a dysfunctional system. If you look up dysfunctional family systems, what you're going to find is that you start to see signs of denial, silence, rigidity, and isolation. So I started to see that I would deny initially that I had any kind of problem at all.
Yeah.
And if I did have a problem, I surely wasn't going to talk about it. So I was silent. Rigid, I was starting to believe that no matter what, this is who I was, this is how bad I'm feeling, it's going to be this way forever. And then isolation, well, this means that I have to deal with the world alone. And that was it. It was this idea of just denial, silence, rigidity, and isolation. And I basically was living in that. And I had to take a year off. I had to get good help. I had to talk to people I cared about who were like, you don't sound good. And I got real tools. And the shift then ends up being is asking yourself, how do I cultivate almost the opposites, which is going to be, it's going to be honesty, communication, flexibility, intimacy. And that, honesty, communication, flexibility, intimacy, like those are the steps. But you've got to start at one relationship at a time.
Right.
But you can't start shifting until you admit to where you are. Because our vision is great, but if we don't deal in reality, it wasn't until I cracked up and was like losing my crap at a client, like yelling on the phone in February of 2019 that I'm like, I'm okay. But most people don't give themselves permission to not be okay. And so for me, in my own brokenness, it was like, Mike, you can't do this. You can't keep going. And my friend's like, can you hear yourself? You're talking about waiting to send emails after 3 p.m. because then you could justify having drank whiskey in order to send the email. Like, you're like, or ice cream becomes a thing of your life every single night. And you don't even think about it because you're just like, I just need to feel something different than what I'm feeling in this moment. Right. And so I had to realize I was stuck in order before I could change into going, how do I create, honesty, communication, flexibility, intimacy.
Yeah, all very scary words, especially for males, because those are difficult. I mean, all of those words allow us to embrace having the vulnerability enough to actually have those type of conversations, that realization to go, oh my gosh, I have to be honest. I have to be able to not go into that denial state of like everything's okay, right? And now to be able to attach even to one person, and that's kind of the premise is it doesn't necessarily need to go, I need to surround myself with an entire group. Maybe it's just one person where I just need to reach out and just say, hey, listen, this is what I'm dealing with. This is something that I'm struggling with, and have that conversation point. And once again, those start to have a compounding effect of once you have that conversation, I think that's a threshold that somebody stepped beyond. And then all of a sudden you realize, okay, wait, that wasn't that hard or that difficult. But we have a lot of these self-constructs where there's going to be a very difficult conversation and it's going to go sideways. But all of a sudden you go, you know what, let me just have that one conversation. And then all of a sudden it really opens up and compounds to a lot of new things. So, even with your own personal struggles with having that type of PTSD moment, and I can't even imagine, and you navigated through that really through an entire year process, and so it kind of speaks to there's not a timeline to shifts. And there's not a timeline to have that immense growth from that. What are some of the bigger realizations? I think me personally, I went through a surgery back in November where it was pretty significant, but it gave me a moment to have a realization that I actually can have a deeper empathy through individuals that may have a bigger issue than I had, but it builds a deeper empathy. But also to me, reconstructing or reframing the context of, man, I almost just lost my life. But now all of a sudden I go, all right, let me reframe that to now build upon that piece of my life, to now being able to go, okay, it's building deeper empathy, but me being weird, it's now an actual experiment through what I'm dealing with. But it was a deeper valley. But when you're going through what you did, after the magnificent thing in 2019, talk us through a little bit about reframing, or I don't even know if that's the right word. What's the right word to kind of have that shift in thought process? Go, okay, it's okay to deal with what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
But help me kind of reframe that, especially
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's all kinds of different ways there, because I think I said it this week in an email I send out. I send out weekly emails, and we were talking about leading in and helping being aware of each other during the protests, and asking ourselves questions about how do we contribute to the next phase in society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea of you can't you can't believe until you belong.
Mm.
And it's this idea that at our core, we all want to be loved and accepted without condition, and to know we're not alone.
Right.
Like at this core element for me, that's my it's my framework. Is I'm like, look, every human being wants to be loved and accepted without condition, and to know they're never alone. And my fear is that vulnerability, all the things we talked about, is that will you exclude me for that? Will you then exclude me for that? And so I will build up a story that you're going to exclude me if I don't believe what you believe, if I'm not as healthy as you think I am, if I'm not who you think I am. And so for me, it was a deconstruction over 2019 of going, who are you if you're not the superhero? Who are you if you don't show up these ways? And so the first answer was, who could I find? Who are the relationships that would let me belong no matter what I believe, no matter where I was in that process? And I think for people, they're trying to go, how do I go forward? How is this about being forward? It's look for the helpers, look for the belonging, look for the moment. And that's part of what gets to be offered us in these moments of, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell who calls what you went through a remote near miss, which is a bomb that goes off, doesn't quite kill you, but makes you aware that you almost died, which then changes your relationship to fear.
Right.
And you're hungry to find the relationships that can do that, because you can suddenly, as you start to find that, you'd be a person to offer that to someone else. I think belonging before we believe is a powerful tool. And that's when we're talking about generosity. That's what I'm trying to say is, how do we become people that allow people to belong so they can figure out what they believe, so they can then give that away to others?
Yeah. Well, that's the power of actually going through those, kind of difficult times. I think this is, especially right now with the climate of things, I absolutely love that, that kind of big awakening moment, because all of a sudden now we can have the realization that change is possible. Right. And it gives people a little bit of a voice to say this is possible to have change and have those progressions of change. And so, the multiplying effect of that can really make massive impact, way down the road. Talk to me a little bit about, and I love how, you dive a little bit into, how moments in life really start to impact future moments as well. So give me a little bit about the just moments in life, and one, just being able to appreciate the moments, but also how decisions in the moment actually can compound things down the future.
Yeah, is that there's both the moments that kind of change the direction of our life. Is like these weird moments where we suddenly have new information, where we suddenly reveal what's, that the world's in a different path, and the relationships we have kind of transform us. But then as well, like, it's the realization of that we make choices in the moment that will choose for us later. It's this idea of going, am I choosing to listen to myself, or am I choosing to ignore myself? And it can put us on a track. And so being aware of, hey, am I choosing openness? Am I choosing awareness? Am I choosing to let people into my life that I may not understand? And that choice that goes, am I willing to let the trajectory of their life change the trajectory of mine? And I think, these are all, when you're thinking about your deepest, darkest valley, like, these are all great, Mike, but these are exhausting ideas. Like, it can feel exhausting. That's a nice thought. It's like, sometimes wanting to be open is what it takes. Like, break it back to the smallest element, being open to a voice other than yours. Like, today I'm going to be aware. I'm going to look for something that changes. That's the bigger step. And so when I think of the moments for me, I recognize when I left home at 18 years old with 5 suitcases for the University of Montana and no money except an airline ticket, because I was an idiot, didn't know what I was doing. $20 from Nine Lord fed me for the first 2.5 weeks. Now, she has no idea. She passed away. She was 85 years old. I was walking out of church and she's like, here, $20 for you as a graduate, which would have been a lot of money in 1992.
For sure.
I live on it. But I talk on stages endlessly about the reality of this woman who likely fed me that first months of my life. The people who reached out. And so I always tell somebody, I tell in the book the story of meeting a guy I call Samir on an airplane coming out of Afghanistan who was a refugee, and his story, he lost his entire family. His brother was missing. His father and mother were murdered. And he was internally optimistic that his next step was going to be great. And I'm walking and we're talking, and I was just like, how do I not be a part of this story? I said, it's like imagine meeting Frodo on the road to Mordor and not giving him a place to sleep. Like, you want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And I think as far as our lives, who in your life are you looking for those that you're like, man, they're on a quest for something. Like, they're trying to win a championship. They want to be gold. How do I get to play a part of their story? Because that very act changes the way you see your own story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think choosing to be a part of that, but that takes being open. That takes looking for it and kind of being aware. And that's my biggest thing. How do we look for the stories to be a part of in the people we lead and the people we love and the people we encounter in random situations?
Yeah, no, that's huge because, being able to be, part of someone's story. And what's interesting is, you don't have to necessarily be the main character, right? But being able to be part of the story, I think that attachment is huge. And so, how does one deal with the fact that, hey, listen, I may not be the main character, but I might be the supporting cast of this particular person's initiative or goal or whatever. What type of mentality do we have with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, I like to throw credit's due. I mean, a lot of people know Donald Miller in the South, and Donald Miller does a lot with story brand for marketing and things like that. But it's this idea that most of us mess up, and the fact that we posture ourselves as the hero, when actually what the world really wants is a guide. Mm-hmm. Is that they want to be that person that you're like, you know what? Who's Yoda? To that person's Luke. Like, the reality is, like, we love those guides. We love those people. Right. And the world is desperate for that. And they will invite you in and make you part of their life and their story if you can go, I don't need to be the hero. The reality is I show up with what I've got. Mm-hmm. And so finding a way, I like the tools of identity. I like Clifton Strengths, Myers-Briggs, whatever it is, Enneagram, anything that can give you language. Because here's the problem. Most people don't have language for their talent or their feelings or their needs. So how can I ever ask for something if I can't order it? Right. You would never go to a restaurant or store without trying to at least know the words of the thing you're ordering, but yet we live our lives not knowing what it is we bring to the table. So someone be like, maybe I'm not the hero, but I don't even know how to be the guide. What do you have? Because the world doesn't really care. Right. They just want to be loved and accepted without condition. They'll take whatever you've got. So it starts by doing the work first to go, I have value, I have talent, I have appreciation, I have needs, I have things I can offer and emotions. How then do I then move to who needs that? And who do I need? And how do I kind of build relationships? Because then it creates momentum.
Yeah. So, with that being a big, first step is figuring out, golly, who am I? What strengths do I bring to the table? Tell everybody again where, some good steps to, gosh, how do I discover that? How do I start to unravel where are my strengths? What are my strengths? And this is your wheelhouse of,
and this is kind of what I do is that we start with vocabulary. And so it's a matter of, and so I start with my clients with giving them words. We use a tool called the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And I think it's $20 on the internet. If you go to gallupstrengths.com or something like if you Google that, you'll find their site. They own all the links around that. But it's the ability to put words to patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior and things you do naturally. Mm-hmm. Most people educate and get experience to add value to their life. The whole concept of this is you actually have natural talent that is going to be shaped by your experience. So start there and then go from there. And then from that's typically where I step in is how do you make sense of that? There's a lot of books that kind of step in there. There's a great book called Extraordinary, but also I do coaching consulting to help teams and leaders understand your strengths and identity so you understand the impact of how you're leading, and then how do you actually kind of operationalize that beyond that.
Yeah, because I think, just simply being understanding your strengths kind of gives you a little bit of ammunition to not necessarily know what to do with it, but being able to have a coach step in and go, okay, here's how we actually navigate through your strengths and how to use them is really, really powerful. It's kind of like, if I can download a YouTube video of a workout, but is that the actual right workout for me? And that's, essentially where, to have to take the athlete and really do massive amount of assessments all the time and be able to understand the direction that we're going, where there may be deficits, where there may be some, compensations. And so it's a constant course direction. So here's an odd question. Yeah. Do those strengths throughout time, do those change, Mike?
Well, what they're finding, and the basis of the research is because there's mindset, which is going to be a different approach. Carol Dweck in her great book, Mindset, love it, talks about having a growth versus a fixed mindset. What we're talking about in StrengthsFinder is this idea that there are naturally occurring patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that are being flexed and be kind of shaped up until the age of 22, 25, when the prefrontal cortex of your brain kind of locks in. We can still keep learning, but we do now have a dominant paradigm. And so how the trick is, over time, we get more and more refined at that. And so the trick is, how do we keep using that? A lot of people, it's not a struggle of finding strengths. Right. It's a struggle of repurposing them. Because the things I used to survive my 20s, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Right. I need to find a new use for the talents I have, whereas most people will try to scoop out their talents and replace it with something else. No, how do we go back to, you have talent, you have ability? When it comes to moving forward, most of us will just kind of like give up altogether. Part of that process, when you're at the bottom of the valley and you're covered in crap and you're covered in exhaustion and you're worried about the end of your world, is to basically just stop, not hunt for the road out, but basically dust yourself off first. Like, you've got to pull back all the dirt that makes you believe you don't have enough talent, you don't have language anymore for what you're feeling or thinking. Do the situational archaeology, I like to say, to get back and say, wait a minute, this is my core talent. Yeah. This is my values. I'm useful. And then go, now how do I take a step forward? Yeah. But you can't step forward if you don't stop and go, this is who I am, this is where I am.
Yeah, and that powerful is now helping equip people to understand this is who I am, irrespective of, I don't care what how many accolades you have on the wall, how many degrees, those are just surface value, but to the core is like, this is who I am from a strength standpoint. I love that. Throughout your experience, I mean, goodness, you've had some amazing stories throughout the time. Give me just one little moment throughout your coaching experience that you would say is probably one of your most pivotal moments or awakening moments from your coaching experience.
It's funny. I've had really amazing coaching experiences, right? Where I mean, for me, like amazing, like from my experience, I won't speak for the client, where I've got to coach at some really high levels of both government and, public world and accolades. But it's interesting, probably the most impactful moment for me that has shaped how I do this is in the end of the book, I tell a story about a woman. I was in Nigeria doing some consulting with one of the largest AIDS hospitals in Plateau State, and got asked to officiate at the funeral of a refugee who had died alone of TB. And literally, there was no coffin. It was a pauper's field in the middle of nowhere. It's about 110 degrees. And me and 3 other people are asked to help with the little village boys put her body in the ground. And I remember standing there, and I'm sitting there, and like, one, it's just a surreal experience in general, but I'm going, what am I doing there? But I remember thinking, in this moment, I didn't care. As I'm going, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm like, who is she? What is it? I'm going, I didn't care what she did for a living. I didn't care like what her title had been. I hadn't cared if she'd ever committed a crime. I didn't care anything about her, except the one thing I couldn't grab. I'm like, how is no one else here? And I kept saying to myself, where are her people? I couldn't stop. And I'm like, what if I said, does anybody know her name? And one woman said, I think her name is Virginia. And I remember being like, how am I here for Virginia? And no one else is. She never knew me in life. And I'm like, at the end, I'd never had a moment. I'm standing with a body in the ground, and I'm going, where are her people? And for me, it shifted my thinking forever. I'm going, at the end of the day, I'm going to ask, where are my people? That's the thing it's going to tell. Is the people that are going to be standing there, like, how do we make sure because that's the question. Who's there to represent you? Who's there? And so I think that back to the belonging piece of me, the generosity piece, as leaders, people that you're leading, they want to belong. They're wondering if you're their people. You yourself are going to ask yourself, who cares about your story? Where are your people? Yeah. Like, that's a leadership lesson, but it's a personal forward moving lesson.
Yeah, no, and that's huge. And so, that's why I always take a look back on you and I's journey through college and kind of seeing your growth professionally and, my growth professionally. It's always interesting is, you take a look at the individuals that we even surrounded ourselves with, back in the day. And some people, from college have done some amazing things in life. And I think it's imperative. I mean, where are my people? And where are the people that, breathe life around me and who can tell my story? I think that's absolutely crucial. And, that's quite honestly, you're one of those individuals that, I know for sure can, help tell my story, and I can help tell your story. And so that's a very
That's right.
empowering thing to have, and I really hope people that are listening and watching can kind of say, okay, yeah, how do I start to surround myself with the people that can help tell my story? But then first and foremost, do I have the transparency to tell my story on who I am? And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really imperative. So.
Yep.
Mike, I appreciate the time. I know you're super busy. You got all kinds of navigating through your own, helping with a lot of companies right now, making some
Yeah.
massive pivots, and really, at the end of this, coaching experience, and we constantly talk about the legacy that is used as what we do as a platform, but really at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, what kind of legacy are we leaving behind? I mean, Mike, you've made some massive impacts, but at the end of this, what's the legacy that you feel like you're really wanting to leave behind with all this?
Yeah, I think, I come back to the loved and accepted without condition and not alone. Like that's what I want from my clients is at the end is that if I can find ways through, like we talked about, the generosity of like the Peloton, of being a person who's biking down the road, kind of leaving the gravity of, hey, look, you're loved and accepted without condition, and you're not alone, which means you can be the best you can be the high performer. I'm willing to be the person at the head of that Peloton that pulls others along because they were likely to keep it up behind me.
Yeah.
Like that's the dream for me, is that somebody years from now is like, that's the guy who helped pull me along when I didn't know if I could keep going and I was too tired. But the wake brought me with it. That's my hope.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Mike, tell everybody where they can pick up Extraordinary, where they can find it, buy it,
Yeah,
download it, whatever.
totally. You can basically do all three: electronic, physical, or audiobook. Amazon, Broad Street Publishing, Amazon puts it out there through Amazon right now. And so there's an audio version, which is great, read by yours truly, the dulcet tones of Mike Dauphinee, but also the Kindle version and the physical version. There's another YouTube channel, just small, where free courses that I've offered over quarantine. I did a StrengthsFinder course, some digital leadership stuff. You can head out to YouTube, check me out there. And I post pretty frequently different pieces online through Instagram as well. So
Yeah.
Instagram, YouTube, all the usual places.
All the usual suspects there. That's awesome, and I highly encourage everybody to pick the book up, let it transform your life, much like it has mine. I mean, goodness, I'm on my third or fourth read of the book because it's just so powerful. But I also enjoy the fact that Mike is definitely one of my closest people that I know I can call at any moment, even though we may have some big intermissions. I know we pick up right where we left off right off the bat, and don't worry, we'll spare everyone from a skit that we'll do.
No song,
no song, no dancing, no inspirational. Golly, that was really funny. Maybe we might have a comeback, and
Someday,
we'll
though,
do
I'm
a
gonna
skit.
share with you photos of your hair and back in the early '90s. The hair that was just
It was
it's like a snake.
phenomenal. It was like half Medusa meets Bon Jovi. It was just amazing. Yeah. So I'm sure we'll find some kind of photos that we can use against me. So, Mike, I appreciate you, man. I love you. I love the impact that you're making. And everybody, listen, follow Mike. He's making an impact. Even if you're needing some coaching through your own navigation as well, please reach out to him. Definitely, if you don't reach out to him, let the first step be pick up the book Extraordinary. Unbelievable book, and all of his digital assets that he has, from the YouTubes to some of the coaching that he's doing on that. Unbelievable stuff. And so otherwise, definitely reach out to him for some executive coaching. And even if you're a CEO, whatever, entrepreneur, or just somebody that needs some help navigating through this thing called life, definitely reach out to Mike. So Mike, I appreciate your time. Keep making massive impact, and we'll catch up really soon.
Sounds good, bro. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Hey, listen, guys, I appreciate you guys. Comment, watch, pass this forward to everyone that you know. Share it, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care, guys.